Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming on this rainy night. My name is Rachel Gugelberger, and I am relatively new here to RU. This is week 6 for me, I believe, so a little bit nervous. But anyhow, thank you for joining us. We have 3 artists with us this evening who are going to speak about their individual practices. Very different work. We're not trying to allege that there's a common string here, but we might get to one later. And the way tonight's going to go is that each artist is going to present about their work and then focus a little bit on what their research and goals are while they're here in Residency Unlimited. And then they're going to kind of lead a conversation / Q&A between them. And I'm going to have a couple of questions in my pocket to pull out, and then of course we're going to open it up to a larger conversation. So again, welcome and thank you for joining us. We have from left to right, Tadej Vaukman, Katarina Petrovic, and Lukas Hofmann. All 3 are Young Visual Artists Award grantees. And a very special thanks, of course, to the Trust for Mutual Understanding for their support of this award. I'm going to begin with a brief bio of Tadej, and he's going to help to fill in the gaps. He lives and works in Ljubljana, Slovenia. He's a self-taught independent artist, photographer, and publisher whose photoist practice is self-described as rough documentary and street photography, and whose unembellished images document and comment on topical phenomena from the margins of society. In 2015, he released his first book entitled Dick Skinners, followed by his second book, Grand Heroes, in 2018, both published by Rostov Publishing in Ljubljana, Slovenia. And in 2014, he founded 585 Zines, a publishing project exploring the medium of the photocopied fanzine. He and his books have participated in several art book fairs, including I Never Read in Basel, Switzerland, Misread in Berlin, Germany, and the most recent Printed Mag Book Fair in New York. So with that introduction, we're going to move on to a brief presentation.
Thank you, Rachel. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us at this conversation. I'm actually kind of looking forward to see you and talk you through for my work. So, right, should I just, yeah. Oh. Like Rachel said, I come from the suburbs, originally in a small town called Dragograd, so basically I was learning everything on my own. I didn't have any artistic input, so the way I started was that I started going with bands and skateboarders on tour. So we were just going around having fun, but this wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was that we did everything together, like coming from the broken families. We kind of made our new family, so the pictures, the photographs I'm gonna walk you through is my earliest work. We go like 10, maybe 15 years back. So, yeah. I was always, I don't know, to be honest, I don't know how I got here, how I sit here talking to you, because I never thought that my snapshots would be something considering art, like finding themselves in museums, in collections in Slovenia, or just for me, it's still kind of, to be honest, funny. I just did that because I wanted to remember what we were going through and what we did last night. It sounds kind of a cliche, fucked up, sorry my language, but that's the way it was. So I don't know. I'm still thinking about it. Like I just said, how I got here. I was never thrown in the art community in Slovenia, not also in Europe, in the photography circles. So I'm kind of glad that the critics, the galleries and curators thought my space belongs more into contemporary art, since I still don't understand why. Maybe I'm gonna find out later when I'm a little bit more mature or older. I don't know. I'm just a stupid joke. So this is, I was always interested in all these details. For example, I shot video or took photos of my friends cutting nails, like fingernails, or just, for example, this was our 3-month tour in Portugal and Spain. So I spent most of the time in a van with my friends, and I thought this is the most beautiful thing I saw that day, probably. That's why I took that photo. So these photos, like I told you before, they go back 10 plus years, and they're all put together in the book Rachel is having right there. So if anyone is interested, you can just swipe through. And this photo for me is, I'm going to be really brief. It's one of the photographs I had in Ljubljana in a gallery called Škuc. It was my first group exhibition, 2010, it doesn't matter. So the photo was displayed in the gallery as a wallpaper. I think it was like 4 by 5 meters. And I remember that the people, like art people, were saying, "You don't belong here. What the fuck is that?" So they were, I don't know. I really like the response. This is what I wanted to do. So having just displayed one photograph and it's in your face. So what's the funny thing is about it, this photograph is now in a contemporary collection in a museum of modern art in Slovenia. So I just want to point that out. And the thing, what I'm trying to say is that I still have the same approach which I had, I don't know, like 15 years ago, but somehow people are telling me this, it belongs to the art world, which I think is, for me personally, really important. And I will leave you with that thought. So if anyone has any questions later, I'm here for you guys, so we can hang out and talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Tadej. The next artist is Katarina Petrovic. She's an artist and researcher working at the intersection of art, science, and the humanities with a focus on cosmogony, the process of creation and the notion of infinite generativeness, employing such media as text, language, sound, and code. Her hometown is Niš, Serbia, and she is based in the Hague, Netherlands. She has quite a few exhibitions under her belt, including Great But Late during the 2019 Sofia Art Week in Bulgaria, the solo exhibition Heart of Darkness at U10 Art Space in Belgrade, Serbia, Test Lab, Summer Sessions Homecoming at B2 Rotterdam in the Netherlands, and the Sonica Festival in Earth Without Humans 2 at Kapelica Gallery in Ljubljana, Slovenia. She is a recipient of the 2019 Dimitri Vasiljevic Mangelos Award, which is the Young Visual Artist Award for Emerging Visual Artists in Serbia, and was previously nominated for the Emotional Synthesis Future Dome Prize in Milan, Italy. She received a Master's in Art Science between the Royal Conservatoire and Royal Academy of Art at The Hague, and she also studied at the École Nationale Supérieure de Beaux-Arts and is affiliated researcher at Centre Leo Apostel, Transdisciplinary Research Department in Brussels.
Thanks, Rachel. Okay, so this sounds really quite a lot and a lot technical. So I'll give you just a little bit of a background to my practice and a little bit about my practice, and I'm going to make a timer, because this, you know how it goes. Okay, so I studied in Belgrade at the Faculty of Fine Arts, and before that I did an art high school, so overall I had 10 years of traditional arts education. And then after my studies in Belgrade, which is a very traditional school, just as anywhere I think in Eastern Europe, the academies are keeping to the traditional norms of how to make art, I decided that being a nerd that I am, I need to find something that allows me to combine different disciplines. So I did art science interfaculty in The Hague, which is a department in between the conservatory and fine arts, and there I kind of matured into this practice that you will see here, and of course developed in the context of the Netherlands and that specific art science scene. So this work is the work with which I won this award. It's basically I'm looking into some concepts which are escaping our rational thought because they're the paradoxes in themselves. I'm interested in how do we give meaning, how do we understand black, because we can't see black. How do we understand infinity? Because we can't know infinity. So how do we deal with these concepts which are always beyond our comprehension? And in this work, what I did is I collaborated with the European Space Agency to develop an antenna to listen to Jupiter radio missions. So what I did, I joined the community of radio astronomers, and I did some experiments that didn't succeed to record good Jupiter emissions. But as amateur radio astronomers, I used the data of other listeners, and in this work, I translated the radio signal from the planet into words and into poetry. So that poetry that generated text is later projected into the black cube. And I tend to make these very complex, I wouldn't say complicated, but just complex setups, so I can't go now too deep into them, but if you're like, if something sparkles you want to know more, please ask. This is a patch that I wrote together with Mirko Lazovic and Edo Polis, who helped me translate the sound and radio emission into words. And this is the generated poetry that happened over the 4 years of presenting this work. So every time I install it, new poems are generated, because Jupiter just keeps talking. And I published 32 books of 16,000 poems. This is how this poetry in the water looks like, and I was really impressed to find out this was really a coincidence, because I had a symbolic and kind of like associative way of getting here. And finally, when I did it, I thought to myself, okay, this is really interesting how the light and the letters in the black are in fact resembling the spectrograms that we do of radio signals. This is what you see when you're analyzing an audio signal. These shades and marks. That you could see here on the left in the patch. So this whole thing started with this idea that you can explain things in language, or not. So I made another algorithm, this is how it started, where I tried to explain every word in a sentence of a verse from Jorge Luis Borges, and I took a verse from a poem that he wrote in English, and then I explained every word, and I explained every word in the explanation, and every word in the explanation, and every word in the explanation. So finally, the 8 words turned into 47,144 explained words. Overall, 2 million words processed to get to 4,000 pages book that tells you what this verse is about. Yeah, it's in fact an infinite process. As long as you have words coming up, the process will run. So in a sense, I created a self-referential world where everything is explained and everything is connected to everything, essentially infinite. And if you change just one single word, everything changes. So it's a very dynamic, very organic process in a sense as well. And these are the diagrams and some of the thoughts that came out of the lexicon, because I am not a scientist and I'm not a linguist. I was interested in how can you visually represent an infinite process? How can you even come to understand it. One of the diagrams led me to the black square. And I thought, this is really this is a perfect representation of our knowledge. Black. This is a recent work that I've done this weekend. And this will be exhibited next month at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Novi Sad. It's a flag, and there I'm making a comparison. On the left you see the lexicon, which is the interactive version of the book itself, the diagrams, and the other one, the first installation you saw. So basically, I also developed these modular structures that I can take apart, build them up, always different, but always similar. Yeah, that actually came, of course, from my work, but also from difficulties of working in different galleries of showing your work, where you can't use the wall, you can't use the ceiling, you have all these limitations. So I thought, I'll just make my work completely self-standing. And finally, this is the latest project that I did. Or actually, I can't even chronologically put them together because they keep happening. They just keep unfolding. And this one is a prototype realized in Ljubljana. And no, well, a little bit. No, this was at the Museum of Transitory Art, Sonica Festival. Yeah, you got. Yeah. It was a 2-month residency where I developed a prototype. Not that one.
Sorry.
That was Lukas.
Which year was it?
Huh?
Which year was it?
2017. Yeah, we had a limit of 10 photos, so. No.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a presentation.
Okay. Well, if you're interested, I have a video about this work that can tell you about it. It's 2.5 minutes, and I end with this.
Yes.
We don't have sound.
You just did it. You just did it. You just.
Oh, no.
No, because it goes from the HDMI. So the beamer maybe we need to. Sorry. Thank you.
So different, right? Thank you, Katarina. Our final presenting artist is Lukas Hofmann, who is a curator and an artist working in the field of performance, sometimes through and across the field of fashion, where he is occasionally active as a style and model. He grew up in Prague, Czech Republic during the 90s, and stages his performances across the countries of an increasingly unstable European Union. Moving from place to place, he uses performance as a means to create archipelagos of increased presence that resists feelings of desensitization and disassociation. He is currently in the Masters of Arts program at the Academy of Fine Arts in Prague, and his performances, projects, and exhibitions have been featured in, among other locations, at Savvy Contemporary in Berlin, the Judek Art Award exhibition at the National Gallery in Prague, the Futura Gallery in Prague. He's also had a retrospective performance at the National Gallery in Prague, and so on. So, take it away.
Hi, I'm gonna measure this as well, but now it can be a bit longer. Okay, no. Okay. Wait. I'm Lukas Hofmann, I'm 26 years old, I am from Prague, and mostly I am known as a performance artist, I would say. I also create video art and installation occasionally, and I've recently been made a curator full-time. I am going to walk you through what are mostly performances. It's kind of chronological, so this is the most historic one, perhaps. And it is going to be a wild ride because I have maybe like 25 pictures, so it's probably going to be a lot of visuals and not so much talking about each project. And I'm just going to give you little details about them. So in this one, it was called Unlimited Crossfires Chicas. It was in Berlin, and apart from applying makeup in the sense of, art must be beautiful, artists must be beautiful, to then prepare for the exhibition and performance itself, we also gave everyone a mushroom, a magic mushroom, that might have changed their state of mind. In Berlin as well, with a friend of mine, we performed underneath a scaffolding net that we kept stealing in the dark of the night. And we did a performance called My Immortal. You just might remember a song by Evanescence that was called My Immortal, and that's actually what we were singing. It was very poetic, I would say. And we ended up in a fountain. And there was this kind of rain of fire from the net. In Soy Soya, I was kind of exploring this duality duality in the name even, because you have soy and or soya, but mostly it was about soy in the sense of what a meta material it is, because you produce all of these things from soy that you would call soy meat, soy milk, edamame beans. It's kind of this, to me it felt like this material that the entire world could be made out of in some way. This was an exhibition that I partially curated. It was more like a one-day performative event with many performers, and within that I created this space, again with the scaffolding net. You can see that I kind of repeat some. In my work, there's a lot of what we could call repetition. To me, it feels like it's very processual, process-based, in the sense that I'm never quite able to leave something behind. And here I made a space for readings and meditation. This was quite a big moment for me, in the sense that was the first larger performance. It had, I think, 17 performers in it. It was called IKEA Made Fashion. Again, it involves some illegal activities. I went to IKEA repeatedly, and I was stealing the clothes that they have in the wardrobes. And this has to, so yes, they have clothes, they don't sell them. it's decoration. So in IKEA they use loads of decoration to make you feel at home, and that is an instrument. It's instrumentalized. This feeling of homeliness, this feeling of intimacy, that as you know, shown through all of these decorations that there are, the pots, the fake books, perhaps the fake note, the laptops, the bed sheets, everything is sort of set up by this invisible hand of the faceless employee that was made to sort of inhabit the space. And it's kind of very post-capitalist. It's like a very post-capitalist sort of instrumentalization of intimacy, because it really feels like, I don't know about you, but when I go to IKEA, I really feel very comfortable, and it's sort of disconcerting in the sense that you just walk through these homes. Like home all of a sudden is not even singular, it's plural. In Bob the Builder, we were using building materials in very sort of pastel-like colors, and we would build on each other and have them solidify and then kind of liberate ourselves from. In Athens, before the opening of Documenta, I did Frenzied Chirping with a few performers. What you see here is one of the many activities in the repertoire of activities that I do during a performance usually, and this one is emergency breathing. Rather than to try to illustrate people that are actually suffering, which I would like to separate from. It's a kind of ritual moment of letting go of your autonomy. If you're the one that has this done to them, it's literally like letting go of your autonomy, and the breath all of a sudden is literally guided and directed by someone else. So it's a lot about trust as well, and it's a very moribund, semi-alive, semi-dead state that you're in. It's a very, I would say, deep experience to have. In Zurich for Manifesta, we did Le des Algues, where we collected loads of algae from the river there, and I also made this installation that features this alien sort of cabbage, which is also pH reactive. So in Paris for Enzine, this is another thing that I do to people. Yes, we apply mint balm underneath their eyes, which has a very psychosomatic effect in the sense that it makes you cry. So just how my performance deals a lot with these, let's call them impersonal forces that in the contemporary condition we're living underneath. There's this sort of psychosomatic manipulation that the audience goes through as well. Because not only do I want to have the audience have requirements for me, but actually I have requirements for my audience. As in the last performance that I did at the National Gallery in Prague had 2.5 hours, so go figure. This was at the National Gallery in Denmark. It was called Phantom Limb. And this feeling of this feeling of missing something, this feeling of absence is something that's very much present in my thinking and performance. So this activity, for instance, is very much sort of influenced by, just like my Immortal, by popular culture. So it's kind of, the question is this like more like a Terminator or more like a Pietà? What I do know is that I'm trying to analyze, with this activity of lifting each other up, I'm trying to analyze if I die, does someone have the physical strength to carry me? Containment without touch is another thing that we do. So this was a retrospective. So yeah, it was a performance that I called retrospective, which was half a joke and half need to sort of like sum up what I had been up to that year. This was in Moderna Museet in Stockholm. It was a part of the Fashion Week. As you have noticed, fashion is like relevant to my thinking, and garments are as well. And in this one, among other things, we would carry each other in this construction bag. And it was very, to me, it feels very mythical or biblical almost. In Dry Me a River, we would use this kind of membrane of the pieces of glass that you would stick your faces onto, which is something that I enjoy a lot, but it's a lot about this aggression and violence of even representation. It's kind of like this twisted tableau vivant, this how you try to take the 3D reality, so to speak, and just squeeze it into the representation of 2D, like taking a picture and sort of killing the subject with that. This was rehearsal, so basically it was a workshop during which we did, like with people, we did what I usually talk about with my performers. Apart from performance, I also curate. So this was from an exhibition that I curated called A Guiding Book for a Blind Dog. That was basically just supposed to like show and make present all these different realities that we live in nowadays. Because there's no grand narrative, there's no unifying truths anymore. It almost feels like there's literal parallel realities and to live in. This was Sospiri. That was for the National Art Award. At the National Gallery once more, and we wore historic costumes, and the deal there was basically it was this timeless period somehow during the performance that always happens. It was kind of like it stemmed from like going through the deposit of clothing of the Czech television and seeing that there's just so much like reading that we like give historically to things. Like there's so many layers and layers of like societal like coding. So there's the king, there's the maid, there's the knight, there's the princess. You know, like it's hilarious. And there's literally a department of poverty. Like there's a department that's called poverty, the poor, and that's like all rags. And this was an installation that I did. So this is like. These are these very like anthropomorphic pieces of glass. This was the 360 video. This was the last performance. And before so I would just like to invite you to an opening of mine that's going to be here in New York. It's going to be at Art in General in Dumbo. It's on November 24th, and there is going to be a performance. I'm a performance artist mostly, right? It's a 1 hour long performance, so I would love you to come. And we're gonna have you see the book that I brought here to New York. If you happen to like it, it is now available at all these 4 places in New York. And obviously, like you can just talk with me and make it work. And that's it. Bye.
So now we're going to go a little loosey-goosey, and the artists are going to kind of lead a Q&A amongst themselves, and then if my questions align, I'll insert them. Otherwise, I'll hold on to them for after, and then we'll just open it up for a Q&A conversation with the audience.
I'm going to subvert a little bit and ask if somebody has a question.
I have a question.
Yes.
It's not a question. Do you know from the late 70s, early 80s, Neu, La Düsseldorf, because it's German, and I think it's very similar. Your work and his work.
Oh.
You know? Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the name.
La Düsseldorf.
Okay.
It's a proto-punk rap grab.
Right.
It's very nice. I think you will love it. And then I saw in your book something about Clarice Lispector.
Yeah.
Yeah. I saw it was a snapshot. I saw.
Yes, correct.
And she was a friend of my father, you know, and it touched me a lot. Yes, that's it. The only question. And I saw your work so close to some Brazilian female artist, very avant-garde from the late 50s and 60s, that I used to go to their home my father and my mother. So it's very nice for me to be here and to be with you. I'm older than you. So,
Thanks, sir.
Yes, thank you.
but La Düsseldorf, we must listen to it.
I'm gonna write it down later. So
Okay.
don't forget. I forget it. I'm bad with names.
It's not easy to go to YouTube. They are not in YouTube. You have to buy old CDs.
Okay.
At Saturn Records in Cologne.
Cool.
Okay.
Thanks, sir. Thank you.
Anyone else has something to comment? Yeah. Yeah.
I was thinking what connects you because it's so different. So I think you two both observe the world, but you observe Jupiter and you observe
We don't want to do this.
in very different ways. And
Are we good? Everyone can hear? Is it the way?
yeah,
Cool.
and I think your work fits in the opera. Where else would it fit? I mean, it would fit in your family. I think it's
I don't know. I think so.
observing, looking, seeing, feeling, thinking.
These are all the things. Exactly what I think, but I got the thing.
Sorry. Thanks. Okay. So yeah, the thing is, I'm aware of that, but I was quite surprised because, like in the beginning, I didn't think about that, you know. And after all these years, like finally figured out that's what you said, like observing, hearing, smelling, touching, everything it's all about these emotions, all about these little things, which makes for me art. So the how to put it, like in the position where I'm right now, I think it's not about recognition, it's not about but at the same thing it kind of is, because they were always pushing me, they didn't want to confess. I don't know if it has to do something for where I come from or education or something, like Slovenia, Ljubljana in particular. It's a academic city, and I just didn't know nothing about it. Like for example, like the pyramid picture. When the first time was shown, I already told you that they were like, so there was one guy coming to me and asked, "Do you know about the group Home and or Irvin and the like old avant-garde Yugoslavia and the things?" And I was like, never heard of it. So they were kind of asking me if I wanted to make like a new version of it. Funny thing about it, I was just showing my work if we had a contemporary artist from the Irvin, Ojo, Laibach, and it's a snow ball. So I think that if I answer your question, I'm fine with it. I think it's gonna just it's art, I guess. Thank you. Okay.
No, actually, just in a way, something to say about your art and also maybe a question. That's funny. Today I see a lot of exhibitions, and of course, I think it's become more fashionable also to deal with sex. And I think a lot of works I always feel that they're expressing or bringing the sex issues, and I don't feel it at all. And in your works, it seems like I feel something very sexual in the sense of something like something that I miss in some ways in the.
And it's not even supposed to be sexual.
That was my question. Yeah. So it is. I don't know if I'm the only one who feel like this, but it's also sexuality that's very very different from my sexuality. In a sense, I don't want to talk about
I think
straight, queer, blah blah blah. I think it's something that is very rough, but at the same time very. It's that you're attracted to the figures, and you are also very present in the photos. And I was wondering about it.
I was always there, but to be honest, I never thought about sexuality. I mean, there was a lot of I'm sorry. There was a lot of things going on at that period, but we sex as well, you know what I mean? But it was never the point of like showing photos being sexual, nor even erotic, nothing. For example, at the new work I'm in 2020 doing a couple of shows. It's gonna be I was always touching friends and family, always going deep into like exposing them, and I think the next thing is exposing myself, and it's gonna be like visually really straight to the point, maybe sexual but not sexual. I think this is like I totally know what you're saying. I just wanna make clear for others. It's
not sexual.
it's just a day in the life. It's just a day in the life. It's just like all these things, like I don't know, crying.
I'd love to add something to that because that was originally going to be my first question.
Right.
Just for a little bit of background. So the very first week I was at RU, I met with you, and we're sitting upstairs in the room, just the two of us, and you're showing me your book, and I'm seeing lots and lots of penises, right? So this is a lot of masculinity here. So my question is, who do those penises belong to? And can you speak a little bit to the context, like the time and place of those images? What's going on?
So the penises belong to my good friends of mine, and it's just like we had when we started this conversation. It's just things which were happening, like taking a shower, masturbate. I didn't want to put masturbating photos up. Wasn't sure if any kids gonna show up. So. It was just a time capsule for me. It's like just normal things. I don't want to ruin the party for you, but it's nothing special. It's just like friends taking a shower, shaving their dicks, having just it's the common things which I think like I don't know. It's right. Yeah, it's just normal. And even now, I don't take that much kind of photos because all my friends showed at the photographs in the Dick Skinner's book. We kind of go our own ways. We're still in the same field, just I would say on a different level. And yeah, I'm doing these things now by myself. I'm taking self-portraits of normal stuff. Sometimes I take a video or photographs of me eating. It doesn't make any sense for me right now, but I think it's gonna, after a while, I'm gonna figure things out why I'm doing that. And this is the beautiful thing about it. I don't know if I answered the question. I hope so.
I mean, now that we're talking about sexuality, we had this general rehearsal this morning, the three of us, presenting our work. And I talked with Lukas previously how he is choosing materials to work with based on symbolics of the materials to represent processes like purification or cleansing. And talking about cleansing. So that they also talked about, so speaking his name now, he talked about how he's going to have 5 solo exhibitions and that he's going to be treating himself as a subject and going through purification. And I thought it was very interesting that all of us are going through similar processes, having completely different contexts and practices, but the processes are the same. And it just reminded me that actually I started my work, and my work you don't see anybody, no sexuality, just the play of the mind and concepts, but I in fact started by making a suit for sexual pleasure. And that was 10 years ago. And I made a suit that you wear underneath your clothes when you go to the church. So when you are making the when you're making the amen, when you're praying to the God, you're pressing certain points of your body, and I put touch sensors on those points, and those touch sensors activate vibrators and until the so you can have your pleasure from fate.
That's the best thing I heard.
Yeah, so I actually, we can maybe approach it from the point of sexuality, but I think that, when I'm talking about, we talked about how we don't want to find similarities between our works, that exactly this is the point that's coming from Eastern Europe, that you can meet so many different practices, different considerations of the world, and finally we can't help ourselves but find patterns.
Yeah, and to continue or expand on the topic of sensuality, I presume that my work sees sensuality in a very different way, and the body, because even though it's performance, even though it's supposed to be bodily, it's kind of somehow the opposite of that in some way. It kind of searches for the absence, such as the absence of touch. So you would have the performers enact these they would try to sort of see how it feels to contain someone without a touch, how to connect without actually touching each other, and they would just lock their fingers, two fingers, as if they were some sort of rings, and just very minutely or very intently try not to touch at all. And it kind of has to do with the fact that when you do performance, you kind of come to this point when I guess you don't want it to be that primary, and you don't want everyone to hold hands and sing Kumbaya together and hug, and that's not the point anyway for me at all. I'm not trying to it's not just healing, it's kind of like therapy, but it's also evil therapy, it's also negative, and because I think it's important actually. And with the to just expand on the sensuality, I feel like there's a lot of obviously there's a lot of suppressed sensuality as well in the work, but it also has to do with, just like everything in my work, it has to do with the way that I read or understand the contemporary condition of the realities that we live in. At least that's the way that it is for me. And but in this installation in the back, those are climbing holds. So it's holds that you, like a boulder, when you go climbing. And those are literally even in the installation, it's kind of everything relates to the body, but it's kind of almost, it can be the negative space for it as well, the opposite of it. So you now have these ergonomic holds that are sort of waiting to be touched, but absolutely not, right? Because it's also the exhibition space, and no one's gonna touch it because it's artwork. And also this thing of touch and art and aura and presence and existence and body and blah blah, and material, it's also apparent in when we do this embrace to sculptures, perhaps. So in one of the performances, you might have seen it in the retrospective, we would embrace the sculptures in the National Gallery without touching them. So again, you can read into it in the institutional way, and it just kind of think of how the aura, how there's these this institutionally created aura of things, and then they're not supposed to be touched, and kind of transpose it. It's kind of transposed between the human and the object too.
I'll go slightly off topic from the sexuality, or perhaps not, but when we met, Lukas, you had talked about your performances as being a collection of individuals as opposed to a group. And I was curious to hear more about how you what you mean by those differences, especially I think because in the US, this idea of the individual kind of being something that is above the collective, and as we see, that's very problematic, especially today, and also perhaps other notions of the individual as being this kind of genius. I was just wondering if you could kind of elaborate on the difference between a group of individuals or a collection of individuals versus a group.
guess it just has to do with, it just goes back to the way that, like how my thinking and my work and my curation as well just reflects the way that I think of, that I personally think of like society and like the sort of conditions that we live in or that we're given to be in by these external forces, and there's many. And like so like in my performance, it's kind of it's interesting. It is because I feel like it's everything at the same time. Like the performance is at the same time very like anxious but kind of hopeful too, and it's kind of like unbodily, but then within that it's very like there's this sort of suppressed like thing to it, and at the same time it's a collection of individuals, and in some way it also is. And you're right that I would call it a collection of individuals in the sense that it's just really the charisma. It's just really the strong personality that I'm striving for, and I really think that is the key to why, in the end, it still is performance that's like my central like point of interest, because it is just, I don't know about you, like what really like drives you in life, but to me it really like ends up being completely drunk on someone's presence. It's kind of, I enjoy it to the extent that I just love these people that just like come in the room and they just completely fill it to the brink, and it's just like that is something to feed on, or to just like have like nurture, like it's so nurturing. So I think in that sense as well, right? To have so it's kind of like these strong like charismas next to each other, and in that sense they're very much individuals. But also there's one thing to it, and there's a lot of things that are somehow ethically sort of so-so about the performance, but that is because the performance is not supposed to be like a showcase of what the positivity that we can like deal with. It's literally supposed to be like this very concentrated version of the way that I see contemporaneity. So that's why there's the good, that's why there's the evil in it, and that's why there's the pain, that's why the performers stop breathing, and that's why they choke, and that's why they lack things, and that's why there's the absence. And it's not even that I say that something is good or bad. Like I don't feel like, so I'm not an activist in the sense that in my art that like I would never say that something is true or right or not. So that way I kind of semi-responded to your question and sort of freestyled somewhere else as well. Do you feel like there's some? Do you feel some moral, ethical obligation in the way that you make work? Is there an educational purpose in it? Like, do you actually want to widen people's perspectives with your work, Katarina? Do you want to? What's your motivation?
Not really. It's just like when I started talking about the art which I'm doing. It's just I just wanted to show how important my friends are to me, which I think I could say that I'm going back to the basics. I never thought about art. So I never tried to educate people, and this is the best thing, I mean, for me right now, that people get something out of it. Simple as that.
Yeah, I don't think I have a moral. I just think that in my work, I feel, well, you say you wanted to show how important your friends were, but for me, my friends were books. So, and well, I mean, I really grew up reading a lot, and I came to fully appreciate the potentiality of ideas before they are realized. Just the idea, just the thought of something, for me is more valuable. The idea is more valuable than its execution. In fact, all of my work are failures of my ideas. I always wanted to make something else, and finally it turns out being this, and I'm like, no, this is not how it's supposed to be. And then I'm like, no, this is exactly how it's supposed to be. And but I do think that we're living in a society which is completely saturated with technology that we are not sufficiently understanding or exploring. And in my work, just thought, how does it feel like to bring that technology to the human level, to our also to our bodies, because one specific thing about Jupiter radio signals is that what struck me is that I had this dream about Jupiter before I even knew anything. And then I went to European Space Agency and I told them that I had this dream. Like, great, I just want to hear about my dreams. Yeah, these artists, they just dream. And I talked about this dream, what I saw, and another fellow artist, Dimitri Gilfand, also doing art science work, he was like, but Katarina, your dream was in fact correct in terms of physics. Jupiter is audible or noticeable on the ground. And I was like, wait, what? And I went and researched, and in fact, Jupiter is the only planet in our solar system that is emitting radio waves that can be heard on the ground. So if you have an antenna on 20 megahertz, which is like the lowest of regular radio receivers, you will get noise, which is usually sun, if it is day. And if it is not day, you're either going to get cosmic noise on your radio, or just environment, because planet is a radio emitter as well, but you're going to get Jupiter. And Jupiter frequencies that do penetrate the atmosphere on 20 megahertz have a wavelength of 12 meters. That means that those electromagnetic radiation coming from the planet is in fact in such a wavelength that it penetrates your body. You just don't feel it, and you don't know it. But we're all continuously exposed to cosmic waves and electromagnetic radiation. And I thought, wait, so I could be, and because they're on 12 meters, you could be in a cave, they're still gonna penetrate walls, you know, you can be in a room without windows, you're still gonna feel the effects of Jupiter on your body. And just this idea was so remarkable that I thought, how can we make Jupiter more present in humane terms that are not sets of data that we need years of training to understand. Let's just bring it back and let Jupiter tell us what he's thinking. I don't know where we started.
And it seems like now we're talking about this knowledge, kind of external knowledge sort of coming onto you, and I think there's obviously like so much that we can like connect on, and I think that's also what we talked about today in the morning, with how I was just something that's that runs parallel is not perhaps the same, but it's kind of similar in some way. Is that it kind of feels like this sort of like process of like I was saying today that this like sort of process of education and coming onto things, it kind of like comes from within, like literally like from breath, for instance, from like not like sort of having experiences of not having it. This one time with a friend we did a like mini draw performance where we would hold each other's breath sort of in turns, and we would reach from like 5 seconds to 10 to 15, blah, we'd reach like 2 minutes and a half, and we would like, I was thinking, I thought that I would like pee myself because it's been an hour as well, and I was seeing these like blue, like not green like concentrically moving circles as well, and it was just this experience. It's tripping, but it's kind of it feels very similar to being told that there's this that there's the force that is there's this force, impersonal force, societal force, or force of planets that we're always sort of subject to. Exactly, to be subject to something is kind of a big deal for me.
Yeah, please. What are you subject to?
What are you subject to?
There is a Brazilian artist. I'm Brazilian. Okay, it's been a long time. I don't live in Brazil, but I live in France. J'habite à Paris. But Ligia Clark, I think you have to know her.
What's the first name?
Ligia Clark. And Oh, she's
Oh, yeah,
close
no,
to you. She's in MoMA right
I do
now.
know.
And she's great. She was always. I was a young child. I knew him. I went to her studio, and everything you do. This night it was amazing for me because young people like you, many dreams and a heavy, strong work. I think so. I love it. I love it.
No,
I love it. You know,
It's great.
Natalie knows that. And Patricia Clark, go.
I do know.
You know,
I know you.
every experience with the body, with the relationship, the objects, it's your work. And she is like Eva has, you know, everybody involved in stuffs like that. That you love. I love so, but I'm a painter. So the other side of the world. So that's it.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
So much.
Amazing, amazing story.
Lukas, I have a question for you. You mentioned your curatorship, first in the bio, and then also in your presentation as kind of almost a part of your practice, because it was one of the photos, so that's how I came across. And I was really wondering about that. I was quite intrigued by that. I already thought about it because Katarina told me about you. I'm really wondering whether you let that spill over your own autonomous practice in your curatorship, or if you put up a boundary of some sort, or if you take both and actually interweave it into your practice, and if so, how?
I mean, just like it seems like Tadej's life clearly spills into his work, right? And like how Katarina talked about how she really loves to interdisciplinarily connect all of these things like science and art and technology. In the same way, it is completely these boundaries between things like that we would call visual arts, performance art, curatorship, and perhaps even fashion. They sort of blur together for me, and I'm just really happy for that. And like an example of that is with the curatorship. It kind of feels like, or I feel like I could be, and I guess we all are really, like nowadays the artist and whatever else as well is kind of the producer as well. Like my work is so production based. It's kind of incredible, sad as well in some sense, because that's not the creative part necessarily. It's like you have to like produce so many things around an exhibition. You have to produce so many things around a performance, and that's just something we live through. And with the curatorship, to come back to that, like one example of the curatorship is with the groups of people actually. Like I always say that it's kind of like going to a music festival. Within this really exclusive group, exclusive in the sense that it's not everyone, it's not people that go to a music festival usually are sort of like, will be like sort of the same sort of community that likes this music, for instance. Like, so it's like within that exclusion from otherness, from other, in that point, you get the inclusion. Like within that, like people feel so happy and free within, during the festival, because like it's not everyone actually, it's actually like a group that they construct in themselves, it's like their safe zone, etc. And I feel like there's this weird like tension that I enjoy in the way that I curate the group of people. So it's kind of directive. It's kind of there's this directive point to it. It's kind of you take people, you put them together. So it's kind of and within this directed group of people, that's already like excludes a lot to make
kind of similar
create
the performances that you do, where you select a couple of people that do.
Sure, I mean sure, that's for sure, and also like the thoughts in that exhibition and the like pink book that was like going through, like that's the book that stems from the exhibition, and it's like an art book / catalog. That exhibition really it's almost like runs in parallel to the performance. It really like deals with the same thoughts exactly. It's kind of about many different things. It's about like the performances. They're really about this like hyper-individualization. They're about anxiety. They're about numbness. They're about like feelings of lack of presence, like lack of touch, lack of community. But also they're opposite at the same time. It's kind of harder to trace. And with the exhibition as well, it wasn't supposed to be like a single, it wasn't supposed to have this single topic that it's going to talk about. It was really supposed to be the opposite. It was supposed to be this like plate of like delicatessen, you know, many different colorful realities that different people, beings live in, I guess.
I have a question about your relation between being a curator and artist.
Yeah.
Since there's so many parallels, why do you want to be a curator?
It's, you know, there's a lot that goes in it. That's like it's personal in the sense that there's this gallery called Futura where I've been appointed the curator some 4 months ago. So literally, like, curator is my full-time job now, and I used to be an intern there some time ago.
I mean, my question is
Yeah.
more about art. Your way you work as an artist and a curator is very similar. So could you have taken on, let's say, that position as an artist? Okay, that's just a question.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I love the moments when people say that it feels like an exhibition that was curated by an artist because that's the way it feels even more. It kind of feels like I'm an artist that curates.
You're not separated.
No, not at all.
I just had a question for Katarina. I've been thinking about the books and the language for Jupiter speaking, and I wondered, I think I noticed that you put a lot of the text in English, and I was wondering how you chose Jupiter's native language, like how you chose English as what to translate it into. And then I guess the second, I have a lot of questions, but I'll only ask two. The second one is that great book where you kept doing the meanings of each word. And I wondered, did you write a program that then, so it wasn't like, because my question was about time, for how long you were translating or how you were transcribing that.
Yeah, so I'll begin with the second question. So you asked me how long did it take for the book to come together and what's the algorithm? Yeah. So thanks to collaboration with Jan Kees van Kampen, who is also an artist and a composer and a programmer, he wrote the software, in fact, that made the book. But I started it, talking about time, I started working on this 7 years ago. I have to tell you, again, 7 years it took me to make the book. And this is something that I think is very important because we live, just like Lukas just pointed out, in this complete overwhelming pressure of production. And I am a firm supporter of giving the time indefinitely for our work to come into being, you know? Otherwise we won't get to some deep insights. And so it took me 7 years to come to the point where I can collaborate with Jan Kees. And after we were done with the code, we realized that the point of, language, why language? Why English? Why is Jupiter speaking English? Yeah, because it's a predominant language. That means that the natural language processing and the way we first started understanding the way our language is built started with the countries who developed the technologies first. So that means that the most full dictionary is an English dictionary. I have to say that the Dutch also invested a lot in developing their own natural language processing. So in the Netherlands, I could have done it in Dutch as well. It would be of the same quality. It would be completely impossible in Serbian because Google doesn't even know how to pronounce Serbian. You know, like there are some technical difficulties there. But I choose English because, you know, we are all speaking English, right? Not only that we are in Europe, like everywhere in Europe, this has become our normative language, huh? The universal language, of course. And yeah, so I also wanted to say that the program, once we started it, ran for 7 days. So it took 7 days to generate, without stopping, right, to generate that book. If it was a human endeavor, it would be several lifetimes, I think, because I started doing it manually. Yeah. And it was like, okay, I'm gonna copy paste this dictionary explanation, and then I'm gonna give all the numbers, and then I'm gonna make my index map on a separate file, and then I go like, and I'm like 5 pages, 3 hours past. I'm like, oh, I'm doing great, and I'm like, shit, a mistake, everything from scratch. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm really into these processes where humans cannot compete with the computer. And in terms of a vacuum as well, you know, I don't know, it's very interesting that the amount of information continuously exceeds the threshold of our understanding and the speed of our understanding. And I'm really, in my work, I want to continue to investigate this. How can we then ever, you know, fully understand what are we analyzing?
Also a question to Katarina. It seems like a superficial question, but it's not. About the aesthetic, your aesthetic, the colors, it seems like all of your work is in black, white, and I don't think it's personal, but also I know you 3 weeks, and also I saw it always in black. Just curious, it seems like superficial again, but I don't think so. I have the feeling that it's more than just a decision. I was wondering if it's not relevant, it's okay.
Well, we just gave, yeah, cool question. And you just totally put me on the spot. But we went on the Night of Philosophy, the first week when we were here, right? On the recommendation of RU, we went to this Night of Philosophy, and there was at the New School. And there was a nice conversation, a nice presentation by this guy who talked about, do we see color? And in fact, the color is not a physical property. So color is not a form. And talking about ideas and meanings, I'm thinking about forms. So in a sense, in conceptual sense, color doesn't play a role in my work, you know. But light does. So, you know, also the physics of light, of photos as well. And I didn't even mention in my work, but I'm really interested about black. I think that this is kind of like, we always, we culturally think that black is the color of mourning, or also of something scary, of something submerged or somehow. But I tend to see it differently. I tend to see black as the space of liberation, because it is the space you never really know. So it is absolutely for you to project what you want of this black. And just this mystery and of never knowing. So I think that this is why the books, the 32 books, I keep generating. I mean, as long as I exhibit, the poems are made, so I have even more poems now, but I will keep printing the books ever more deeper in black. But you can't go deeper in white, can you?
Question for you as well. Going back to your theory about Jupiter, did you ever consider the astrology part of that, or did you go straight into physics because naturally that's what you do at that fast run?
Of course, I had my teachers tell me immediately, you know, like, we're living in this era of everyone being so spiritual, connecting everything, numerology, astrology, yoga, chakras, everything. And so what are you doing different here? Like, you're talking about this Jupiter who speaks, you know. It's almost like tarot. You can open the book and read a poem, and you're gonna read whatever you want to read. That's the point, you know. But that's the thing about reading. nothing is really told, nothing is really said. There is no truth in this text. You, the reader, make it. So it is really on this level, no? Of clairvoyance or projecting.
Right.
But yeah,
there was no connection, though, or did you just not pay attention, or you wanted to exclude it from your path?
So I actually did astrology for a while when I was younger, and I departed from there. But I did take mythology into the thinking, because in mythological and Roman mythology, Jupiter was in fact Zeus, so the king of gods, and he was the one who was the protector of the state, the one who is giving the law. He was also the lawmaker, and he was like the primary god. And I thought how weird it was that in Roman times we named this planet Jupiter, like that god who sits high on the level of goddesses. And then we finally realized in 1955 that Jupiter is acting like a star. That Jupiter is in fact really like a radio pulsar, like no other planet, being so massive that we today have theories that Jupiter is not orbiting the sun, but the sun and Jupiter are orbiting each other and we're just stuck in the middle, which I thought was great. So Jupiter, therefore, thinking about mythology and thinking about the physics and what we know today, I thought, well, Jupiter is kind of like this black sun, this invisible sun we never talk about, but very much present, like this Roman god.
I wanted to go back to the book for a moment, I guess kind of for both of you. You were talking about neurogenerative texts and data that they're only possible through these algorithms and through these kinds of digital manifestations of all these different possibilities, right? So why then manifest it in a physical book? Like, given the infinity of possibilities, why continue going back to that particular form, a particular construct of a vessel of information?
I tried doing it in a browser and it crashed. There was too much data. You can't use normal ways of representing information when you have so much information. So I made the file, the lexicon, was 4 megabytes HTML file, and it doesn't sound like a lot, but HTML files are not supposed to be so big. So when you open a full lexicon database on your browser, it won't. And on another level, the book is the body in my work. And if you can, like, if you would notice, you have to handle this book. It's not like a book that you're gonna go to bed with, you know. I'm just gonna read this. No, it's like 15 kilos, you know. You have to. So I played with the physicality of the book as well.
Just Katarina said, for me was the total opposite. I just wanted all this. If I wouldn't make a book, all this memories would go to waste. That's why we decided to make a book with the Rospride Publishing guys. So everything I knew is that I want to have a book that you can put it on a shelf and you can throw it on the floor and it kind of lasts forever. I think it's not going to last forever, but I think it was just some kind of a closure for me. Also because it was such an important era of my life. And computers go to waste. If you don't lose a book, it will last forever, I think. So that's what I try to do.
But in your case, what is it about the zine in particular? Why is it that the zine can still hold that kind of radicality in terms of like distributing information that is for, in particular, marginalized communities or that is activists? Like, what is it still about the zine that can do things better than digital?
I would say it does better. Just for me, I didn't know. be frank, I'm really bad with computers. I suck, really. So that's why when I started making zines, was just the same, which I just said. So end of an era, put it on a shelf. Sometimes when you go to the toilet, pick it up, browse through it. That was everything what it was about. And right now, zine, I'm talking about Slovenian region, Ljubljana in particular. Zine got pretty popular. So all the museums and bigger galleries are like, yeah, when we make an exhibition, we can also make a zine, a presentation. I was like, fuck that. It was, for me, like, zine was always the punk attitude of everything. So, and I'm still kind of holding it to that. So I didn't make a zine for quite a period right now. I think that's the main reason, because I think I see zine still as like, you wake up in the morning, you make a breakfast, and that's it. And when people, especially galleries, they're trying to glorify it, I have a problem with that. I think it should, I mean, everyone has its own ways, but I think the zine is something really simple, pure, and simple. I'm not sure if I answered your question.
I don't have any more questions. Does anyone else have any more questions or would like to share anything? Do you have any more questions for each other?
I just want to add something.
All the things I just said, I just figured out that, but I found myself in a position that they're selling my zines in printed matter, so what does it say about me?
Yes, that's what I wanted to ask.
Yeah, this is,
because... So, and that's obviously not critique, and obviously we like deal with that a lot, as in trying to, like, I don't know, retain your autonomy and like be yourself, but at the same time maybe enjoying that someone gives you the attention. So, like, you know, it's both, right? So my question to you, but maybe like I just answered it myself. It's just, you know, like at the same time we're like why the fuck do they want to like exhibit zines, because but at the same time previously we're like, and I'm happy that they recognized my work. So, you know, it's a double-edged sword.
Like you said, it's kind of a both sided, I guess. Yeah. Oh man, I'm in trouble right now. I'm sorry.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
Lukas, can you reveal a little bit about your performance on the 24th, or is it like
well, it's so on the 20th. No, I mean I'd love to talk about it for a minute. So the exhibition that I'm opening, it's a solo exhibition at Art in General, as I said, in Dabo, 24th of November. Note it down. It opens with a performance, which is what's typical for me. The project is informed by it's called Skin Come Leather, and it's somehow like grows from just like my skin conditions, like dry skin, eczematic skin, rash, itch, all of that that a lot of us have really. It's a very, what they call civilization diseases or civilization epidemics. It's kind of, interestingly enough, it's kind of reversed in the sense that the more what one would usually call economically developed or whatever a place is, the more allergy that is. You know, in some way, 100 years ago, in some way, allergy didn't exist. Like, of course, it did exist. It's just it wouldn't be called that. It wouldn't be thought of the same way. It wouldn't be analyzed the same way. Science develops, and the understanding of things develops. So what then would be like someone like just sneezing is now hay fever, and allergy. So whatever. But it has to do with like my skin condition, with like since like 2 weeks old, just having to like hydrate and have like rashes and like this uncomfortable, sort of inherently uncomfortable feeling in your own skin. And also it has to do with the skin in the sense that it is a membrane, it is the outermost layer of the me, the I, and the rest is not me, right? Philosophically, we're talking like real philosophical now, because it's like that is the thing that separates you from the world, while at the same time it's a membrane that is semi-permeable, right? It has pores, it excretes, it accepts things in it. So that's why I find skin interesting. So the performance is informed by that thinking, but it very much continues in the process of what you have seen till now. And what I'm going to exhibit are some of the things that have previously been in use but now sort of rethought. And there's going to be a new piece of video that obliquely deals with skin too, and the process of how skin becomes leather and what that means.
A quick follow-up to that. Do elements from the performance linger behind in the exhibition? Or are there ephemera from the performances that then become a part of the exhibition? Great. Last chance.
I just want to say how delighted I am that you're all three at the same time part of this program. Makes it really special.
Yeah, we love you. Thank you, Tadej Vaukman.